Welcome along to the transfer show. Just 6 days left of what has already been a record-breaking window. Is there still time for the biggest transfer in British football history to go through in the shape of Alexander Isak? Bereze secured his move away from Crystal Palace at the weekend, but will club captain Mark Guehi also leave Selhurst Park before the deadline? Very good to see you. What can Newcastle fans read into this meeting then at Isak's house?
Well, I think the positive thinking Newcastle United supporters could read into it that they are trying to come to some kind of agreement that will see Alexander Isak reintegrate with the first team squad and be available to Eddie Howe moving forward into the season. Remember, he's essentially refused to play in those first two matches against Aston Villa and then Liverpool, and I would suggest if he remains a Newcastle United player, he won't be available either to play Leeds United this weekend. But I think the more pessimistic amongst the Newcastle fans will think perhaps they're having a meeting to try and get some finality onto this. Now, until we find out exactly what happened between those four walls, we're going to have to sort of speculate and guess. But I think as we stand here right now, 6 days until the transfer window opens, I think all options are on the table. We could yet see Liverpool come back in. I think Alexander Isak still would like to move away from the football club, and it's dragged on for a long time now, this hasn't it? And you would have to suggest that it would probably be difficult for him to reintegrate back into the squad given the strength of feeling among the supporters. Just listening to some of the stuff I heard last night here at St James's Park, and then we see the banners from the fans. I think it would be difficult for him to reintegrate, but of course if Liverpool don't come to the table with an offer that's acceptable to Newcastle, then he of course will remain a Newcastle United player. But behind all of this, and this has been the case for a number of weeks now, is that Newcastle are pretty much getting desperate when it comes to replacements. We know they tried to sign Benjamin Sesko as a replacement for Isak to allow him to go. They failed. They tried to sign Hugo Ekitike, who of course went to Liverpool and ironically scored here at St James's Park against Newcastle last night. They missed out on João Pedro and Liam Delap, and they've tried and failed a number of times, and they're still at the table, active in the market. And I think, look, if they manage to get maybe one for them, hopefully two, and I still think there's a chance Alexander Isak could leave between now and the closure of the transfer window. But Eddie Howe spoke post-match last night, didn't he? He appealed for clarity. He said he wanted the narrative to change, the story to move on. But as we stand here, a day after that Liverpool game, when I think a lot of us thought once the Liverpool game was out the way we could move on, we're still stood here in this grey area of what has become an absolute saga involving both Liverpool and Newcastle United.
Yeah, it's been a tough window for Newcastle, hasn't it? I mean, you mentioned the replacements. That's still the stance, isn't it? The club's position. They want replacements before considering letting Isak go. Can you see a situation where Isak is sold even if Newcastle don't sign a replacement?
Look, I think it would be difficult for them, but if the noise is coming from Isak are that he will refuse to play and he's not interested in being reintegrated, then yes, I think in an ideal world they would have two replacements in. I think, and I've been saying this for a number of weeks now, I think even if they got one replacement in now, and we know they've been trying to sign Johan Wissa from Brentford, we know they're interested in Jørgen Strand Larsen from Wales because they made that £50 million offer yesterday, which of course was turned down by Wolverhampton Wanderers. So we know that Newcastle have been trying, and I think if they were even to get in one, I think it would leave them with a decision to make on Alexander Isak. Ideally they would like two, of course. But then we see the situation with Anthony Gordon last night being sent off, so he's missing for the next three matches. So even the backup striker who's playing out of position is going to be missing. So it's a really, really tough situation they're in. I still see a scenario where Alexander Isak goes between now and Monday. I think in not an ideal world, but in a preferable situation to Newcastle, they would have at least one player in. If they were able to get in both Wissa and Strand Larsen, of course that would open the door for Alexander Isak if the offer is acceptable. But that's pretty much been the situation for weeks now, and Newcastle have found it hard up until now to bring in at least one replacement. And I have to say that story is continuing into this last week of the transfer window.
Kave, let's cut to the chase. So do you think Isak will be a Liverpool player by the end of this window?
Oof. I mean, judging by what Keith says, I think there's a good chance that could happen, but only if Newcastle sign 2 forwards and only if Liverpool increase their offer. I could see it happening.
Okay, Rob, I mean, Newcastle have been trying desperately to find a striker all summer, as Keith was just talking about. He mentioned yesterday they failed with a £50 million bid for Jürgen Strand-Larsen. It seems like quite a lot of money for the Wolves attacker. They're obviously going to get quite a bit when they get rid of or sell Isak on. Do you think they'll go back in with an improved offer for Strand-Larsen? Because 50 million is already pretty top.
It is. Look, the impression I get from the people I've been talking to is that Newcastle is a very well-run football club, and they're trying to work out what good value is here. And they know they're going to get, potentially, if they sell Isak, 120 million pounds for him, potentially. So they can afford to buy Strand-Larsen and probably Johan Wissa at Brentford as well. But they'd break the bank to do it and spend all of that money. And do they think that, with all due respect, Jürgen Strand-Larsen and Johan Wissa are worth 120 million pounds for the two of them? I think they're keeping their financial situation very frugal and sensible. So look, they had a 50 million pound bid rejected by Wolves yesterday. Newcastle don't want to pay more than that. They don't think he's worth more than that. And I think it's a bit of a stalemate because Wolves categorically don't want to sell him. They don't want to sell him anyway, but they certainly don't want to sell him this late in the window when he's such a key player for them. And there's too little time in the window left for him to get a replacement in. And you go into Wissa, and then we get this whole domino effect, don't we, where Brentford rejected £40 million bid from Newcastle for Wissa last week. Brentford are considering a move for Max Bayer. And Borussia Dortmund is one of the options they're looking at, and he is potentially a replacement for Wissa. So they've not made an approach yet. Might they only make an approach if Newcastle do a deal for Wissa? And by the way, to continue that domino effect, Borussia Dortmund are closing in on Fabio Silva at Wolves, who's potentially a replacement for Bayer. So you look at all of that, and all the people that Carver and I are talking to in the industry right now are saying there's an awful lot of players that are ready to move, and an awful lot of clubs that want those players, but they need something to start the domino effect rolling. And that's why I think you and I both feel it's the quiet before the storm right now, and a lot of these deals could happen when clubs get maybe a little bit desperate to move players on and bring new faces in with just 6 days of the window left.
There's lots of talk that Mark Guehi could end up being a Liverpool player before the window closes. The situation is that no new approach has been made for Mark Guehi yet. So as things stand, he is still a Crystal Palace player, and he's preparing for Crystal Palace's really important European playoff game in Norway on Thursday night. Now, he's turned down the offer of a new contract, and he's in a really, really strong position. Of course, he's aware that Liverpool are interested in signing him, and I think if the price was right, Crystal Palace would let him go if they can sign a replacement. And we know they're in the market to try and sign a replacement. And the reason I say he's in a really strong position is because he knows in January he could sign an agreement with a foreign club, because he'll be a free agent next summer. And the kind of clubs we're talking about are clubs of the calibre of Real Madrid, Barcelona, Juventus. Those could all be options for him in January. That's why I think, compared to some of the other players who are very unhappy with their situations and are trying to force through a move, Mark Guehi is not in that boat at all. He is very happy at Crystal Palace until he's told that the situation has changed.
Harvey Elliott then, Dan, because he had a brilliant under-21 Euros, you know, scored in the final. I think he was voted player of the tournament, wasn't he? And just doesn't feel like he fits in that Liverpool midfield sort of attack anywhere.
Yeah, no, I think Liverpool have overcrowded now with obviously the signing of Wirtz coming in now. He plays in a similar position. Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai, they've got some fantastic players. And as good as Harvey Elliott is and how well he has done, it's just going to prove difficult to break in and be a starter in that team. He's given it a great shot over the last few years. He played a huge role in their success as well. But yeah, I see him, the time now is to move on. I'm looking at Spurs, obviously desperate for that sort of attacking midfield player, number 10. I know they're getting linked with Lucas Paquetá. But Harvey Elliott's there, and he's more than capable of stepping into that team and improving that team as well. Also, I know there's European clubs after him, but it's whether he wants to stay in England in the Premier League or try a new country in a new league.
Kostas Tsimikas has finalised a move to AS Roma, bringing an end to his 4-year spell at Liverpool. The Greek left-back departs Anfield after falling down the pecking order following the arrival of Milos Kerkez and the continued dominance of Andy Robertson. With limited opportunities for regular first-team football, Tsimikas opted for a fresh start in Serie A, joining Roma in a deal that includes an initial loan with an option to buy, an arrangement Liverpool had initially hesitated on before ultimately agreeing as the transfer window is approaching its close. Tsimikas made over 80 appearances for Liverpool, contributing solidly whenever called upon, including during the club's domestic cup successes. While he recently stated he was content with his role, he had also expressed a desire for more consistent minutes, something Roma can now offer. The Italian side had been pursuing him persistently, seeing him as a key addition to bolster their defence. His move also reunites him with familiar competition, as he'll battle for a starting role in a squad aiming to challenge domestically and in Europe. For Liverpool, the transfer helps streamline their squad and frees up space following their summer acquisitions.